So just to be totally honest with you, right after I peed in my pants and jumped and ran off the gurney, I eventually came back and decided to go into surgery.
Hit the subscribe button and the bell notification to become part of the Transplant Helper community.
Well, good morning, Transplant Helper community. My name is Jim Merle, and I just want to pause today and talk with you just a little bit about what it's like to actually face the transplant surgery itself. Now, technically, I had a viewer's question that came across the other day. They shared with me a whole lot of detail about their story that I'm not going to share here. We talked for probably over an hour the other day, and I was thankful to have that opportunity to do so, but they were asking a lot of questions, most of which came down to the fact of saying that they were somewhat afraid of transplant, that there was some dread, some anxiety, some whatever you want to call it, some fear, and they wanted to know how that would really work out, how it would work itself out. Well, to be honest with you, and I've already told them this, and I'll share it with you now, we're all going to be completely different as far as that goes, as far as how much anxiety, how much stress, how much fear, how scared we are, for lack of better terms. That's going to differ from person to person. It's just going to be different. But I can share with you my experience, because in my experience and me having a lot of face-to-face contact with other patients, I have learned over time that there are a lot of us that kind of feel similar, not the same, but very similar to one another. And we oftentimes face the similar emotions that do include sometimes joy and excitement and thrill and fear and anxiety and stress, and sometimes some sadness and some depression. There's just a lot of emotions that go with transplant. But again, I'm going to focus today just on the kind of getting the call and what it's like to roll back to surgery. That's the kind of the story I'm going to tell about myself, in hopes that it might assist you in some way. Now, a little bit of background. I was actually faced the transplant, heard the word transplant associated with my name personally about 7 years before I was transplanted. Now, I was born a congenital heart patient, so all my life I lived with some level of heart failure, always had some level of difficulty and disability, and there was a digression of my health for about those last 7 years where things got worse and worse. The doctors were in tune with that. They knew what to expect, and that's a blessing. But, things had taken a turn for the worse. And I knew transplant ultimately was going to be a part of my life. But still, when I heard the word transplant associated with my name, and I've discussed this here several times, it kind of put a lump in my throat. It kind of knocked the wind out of me there for a while, because you just don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that your only option left is to take the organ that you have that's failing, in my case a heart, and for lack of better terms, pull it out and get rid of it and pack a new one in and see if it starts. That's the way I thought of it. That's not exactly the way it works, but that's the way it felt. And that caused some problem. It was hard to deal with. But once they told me I had to be transplanted, once I officially went through the evaluation process, which for me was several times, but eventually was listed, I incrementally got more and more confident in the process. And I've always said knowledge is really power in this. And the more I learned, the more I dug, learning about transplant, learning about the surgery itself, learning about the center that I was going to, UAB, and some of their statistics and numbers, I got a little more confident with every day, I guess you could say that. But went ahead, got through about a 10-month period right there where I was listed, but thankfully outside the hospital, resting at home. A couple of IVs I was on, and some heavy medication orally, but for the most part, still functioning. They finally, after about 10 months, put me in the hospital. And I'd been in the hospital almost a month, not quite a month, when on May the 15th of 2013, I received news from one of my nurses that came in the room and said, "Mr. Merle, you're NPO to further notice. There's a potential heart for you." And I can remember when she said that, the emotions that I expected, which were panic, fear, anxiety, stress, every one of those just flew over me right then. And I was so concerned and so worried, and I doubted right then that this was even the right decision. And I really considered calling her back in there and saying, "I don't know what this day is going to be like, but I don't want it. I wanted to chicken out," is what we would say. And I wanted to get out of it, but I didn't. Went through the whole day. Long story, I won't go into detail. It turned out to be a false alarm, a dry run, if you will. and they came in and said, the organ's not yours. At the end of the day, it wasn't mine. Now, thankfully, there was a man down the hall that did get that heart. I was blessed enough to step out in the hallway. I heard the rustling and bustling of the gurneys, and I stepped down the hallway, shook his hand, and congratulated him on, getting that gift, and wished him the best, told him I'd pray for him, and he went off to surgery. But that still left me without that transplant yet, and I didn't know what the future would hold. So I went through another week. Ended up being May the 22nd. I was transplanted on the 23rd, but on May the 22nd, I heard the news that there was another heart available, NPO to further notice. And I was a little bit less panicky then, because I think in the back of my mind, my thought was, this, it probably won't work anyway. This will go to someone else, or the organ won't be good, or whatever. Don't get your hopes up, kind of an idea. But as that whole night, it turned out to be a night process, went on, they kept reassuring me, it looks like a go, it looks like yours, and such as that. Up until the next morning, they came to the room and said, we're about to take you down for surgery. And I didn't understand at that point they really meant the pre-op and then on to surgery, but they were about to take me down. And I can remember then, again, that whole panic feel, that flush that came over me of stress, worry, concern, fear, being scared, as we would say, scared out of my wits. That all came over me again. And I can remember thinking, and I had almost planned this in my mind for months anyway. I remember thinking, they're going to roll me out of here on this gurney. And at some point, I'm going to jump up and run off. And I'm going to tell them, no go, give it to somebody else. I can't do this. And that's why I honestly expected to happen. I was trying to be strong, trying to, go for the best and to be thankful for the gift. But that's the way I felt. So they let me, hug on some of my family and friends that were there. A few of them got to come on down. My wife and parents and such came on down to the pre-op area with me. But I can remember, even if they were rolling me from my room in HTICU down to pre-op, I remember, strangely enough, with every twist and turn and corner, and UAB is a huge facility, by the way. If you've not known about UAB Hospital, and I know a lot of transplant facilities are like this, they're big places, they're universities, many of them. UAB covered at that time about 15 city blocks, and I mean covered 15 city blocks. It's much bigger than that now. It's expanded several times. Had at that time about 50,000 employees. Okay, so that's actually technically the biggest employer in the state of Alabama. UAB's health system is UAB Hospital being the main campus, and had 2,300 specialists. So what I'm saying, a huge place. So for going from HTICU down to surgery was a long winding trail of, felt like a mile or so, and you can literally walk for miles and miles in that place and never get out of a hallway. But it was a long way. And again, with every bend, I'll be honest with you, the panic began to shed itself. And at some point, for me personally, I finally came to the perspective that I have to turn this over to God. That's what I believe. That's what I knew. And I had to turn this over to God. And I started doing that as we were wheeling. And finally, I got all the way down to what felt like the OR. That's when I found out I was actually going to pre-op. Just ignorance on my part. But when they finally made that last bend, I remember feeling pretty confident in that. And they got me in the pre-op area. And of course, pre-op is what it sounds like. They're prepping you for an operation. They started, poking and prodding and checking and doing all these things, setting IVs, whatever. And my wife and some of my family were able to come back there with me, at least for that period. And I had, at that point, I felt kind of a peace. I felt confident. I knew that the team that I was associated with, the center that I was associated with, all the doctors, all the nurses, all the care technicians, all the anesthesiologists, you name it, everybody knew their job, and they knew what to do, and they were masters, in that. They were skilled. And I had put a lot of confidence in that as well. And so I felt pretty good about the situation. Now, on the other hand, my wife, she was having some issues as it got closer and closer, and the more they came in and told us, and we knew it was for sure. At one point, she got this weird look in her eyes, and I knew something wasn't going right. She kind of leaned back up against the wall and then just kind of slid down. She nearly passed out, if not passed out. They had to assist her. But that's how she was feeling. I was still laying there in the bed, unbelievably to me. I couldn't even believe it. And I was pretty confident. I was not worried. I was not as concerned. I was feeling good about it. And so it came down. That was a process that lasted a couple of hours. Finally, they come in and say, okay, family giving you your last hugs, kisses. He's going into the OR right down here. And they started to wheel me out. And I remember then in my mind, mentally, I literally thought, okay, Jim, this is it. If you're going to jump and run, if you're getting out of here, if you're going to give up on this, you need to get off this gurney and hit the road right now. We say in the South, you need to tuck your tail and run. Get out of here. This is your chance. And I remember thinking that and actually saying that in my mind, but I wasn't reacting to it. I still felt a sense of peace. And we turned the last corner. I'll never forget those operating room doors. And I'd been in operating rooms before for other reasons, but I'd never been in this operating room to my knowledge. Those operating room doors swung open, big double doors, whatever they are. And I saw the biggest room I guess I'd ever seen in my life. It looked like a gymnasium or something, but it was filled with bright lights and tons of staff. There had to be 20 people standing around, milling around, doing their jobs. Other than the people who I could kind of make out in silhouette form almost, and the light that I saw blue cloths everywhere. Every table, as far as I could see, was covered in a blue sterile cloth, and this was real. But again, I thought about that again. I thought about running again, and I realized you're not going to run. You're okay with this. You're fine with this. And so when they took me over, they got my gurney wheeled up against the operating table, and they said, Mr. Merle, if you need some assistance, or if you can, you'll slide over to the table. We'll get ready to get started. I just scooted my little booty over on the operating room. I call it slab over there. And they rolled my gurney away, and I looked up at the lights, and I thought, this is okay with me. I'm at peace with this. I can face this. I can do this. They can do this. God can do this. And I felt okay about it. I felt maybe I was without emotion, but that was good enough in the moment. I think the emotion was I was just happy. I was, thrilled that this could be. And I was, I don't guess I was excited. I almost said excited. I wasn't excited about it, but I was comfortable. There's the word. I was comfortable with it. So that's kind of my story. That's kind of, again, I felt like I was going to jump and run, or that I would never be able to do it. And ultimately, I was able to do it. I was able to do it with a level of peace. And that was good for me. That was exceptional for me. And what an opportunity that turned out to be. So what am I saying to you? One, I'm saying everyone's going to be different. Your emotions right now might be different. If you're waiting on transplant, if you've had transplant, your memories of transplant may be different. The way you face the surgery or the call or the combination of both may be very different. But because I have a lot of experience dealing with a lot of people face to face, and as well as through this channel, which I'm blessed to be a part of, by the way, I've heard from a lot of people before, and a lot of people are kind of that way. They're like me. They're afraid. They're stressed. They're worried. They're concerned. But they get to a place where they just have to just let go and just say, this is what it is, and the process will take place, and I'll be fine at any rate. So that's kind of where I got. And again, your emotion may be totally different than that. You may have never been afraid. You may have always been afraid. You may have never found peace. You may have had peace from the beginning. I don't know. But the thing is, I wanted to share for the person who asked, this is my story. This is what happened, and this may be similar to you. And I think it is a goal to reach for. I think there's a place in your mind where no matter where you are on the transplant journey, if you're pre-transplant, go ahead and get your mind ready that this is going to work. This is going to be okay. This is going to be fine. I'm going to be fine with this. And just set yourself up for that. Set yourself up to succeed and not fail. And try to keep positive thoughts in your mind and move into it as best you can. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. Please remember, I would love to hear your comments below. If you can tell a little bit about your story, how you faced transplant, how it went. Maybe you remember, like I do, going into surgery. Tell about that. That would be a huge encouragement to anyone. Even if it is, seemingly negative, tell about that. I promise you'll help somebody else. And please remember, I do answer as many questions as possible here on the program. I always answer questions that I get, at least texting back or messaging or calling back. But I'll answer as many as I can here on the program. So be sure to reach out to me over on Facebook. You can find me under my name, Jim Murrell, JIMMURRELL, or at jim@thetransplanthelper.com. I will be certain to help you out in any way that I can. And I wish you the best. I wish everyone the best. Share your stories, and let's continue, please, all of us together. Stay stronger, friends.